all of them are stakeholders in the acquisition of a solar project.
Right.
The installer has a role, the code official, the consumer, the engineer,
right.
anyone participating
the insurance
in that,
company.
all of them have a role.
Yeah.
And not one of those roles are separate of the others.
Right.
So from IBTS's point, we use data to drive the topics that we train on, and then we change the topic of the education specific to the audience.
As I walk around the NABCEP conference here in Raleigh, North Carolina for NABCEP 2024, I see a lot of folks talking about workforce development, standards, and code enforcement. However, I have to ask myself, how is standardization of codes across the United States enforced, and especially for companies that have to think about that in multiple jurisdictions? Today, you're in luck because I've got my friend Rudy Saporite back on the show to talk about just that with his organization IBTS, where he works specifically in the energy services sector. We are live at NABCEP 2024 at the Suncast Media Zone, brought to you by LG Electronics Energy Storage Systems. Rudy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Nico, for having me.
Great to see you again. Last time we were hanging out was at the Solar Games down in San Diego.
I was quite a bit busier than this show, for sure.
You were quite a bit busier. I love the NABCEP show for you as like a chance to sit back, like the Homer Simpson back into the hedgerow, like not
I
on
secretly
the stage.
do have an IBTS logo under this shirt, but this is notoriously I'm not selling. I'm here amongst my peers, fitting into the group, learning. It's one of my favorite conferences.
I've heard so many people say that exact thing. This is my favorite conference of the year. I feel like I'm with my family. Why do you think that is? Why does NABCEP engender, I mean, it's the technical training conference. Why does it engender that sort of family feel?
The industry itself. All of us are from a different background, but very similar. It's like your degenerate friends, I guess, in a sad way of saying.
Yep. I've heard
but in the best way.
Yeah, the solar bozos.
The solar bozos are cowboys, cowgirls. They're just a group of folks, and I think where it comes is this conference removes your competition, your sales. I'm here getting CUs, I'm here learning. The folks that I'm learning from are within the industry, all the professionals here, Brian, Mahalik, Rebecca, and the reason I bring those two up is why I think the core for family.
Yeah, they've been doing it for years.
Post-pandemic though, we all got in this funk, I hate it, right? We were going to the Knoxville conference for NABCEP. It was the first conference I went to post-pandemic, and I was hoping I missed my flight on the way there.
I'm my goodness.
I don't even want to go.
Yeah.
Just in this funk, I don't want to be there. Thank gosh I didn't miss my flight. We got there, and Brian and Rebecca said, hey, we're going to get married tonight, and Jeff Spees is going to officiate. So we all broke up. We went out, bought some wedding gifts, and just, sad for them that their wedding was essentially groomsmen of the rest of us and bridesmaids. But it was a blast, and it really put into perspective why I'm in the industry, why I love working with these folks. Granted, I've been in trades my whole life, but to be in trades with folks that care this much about both you and the growth of an industry has been a blessing for a decade and a half to be in.
Indeed. The most common question I hear folks toss your way is, what's IBTS?
Yeah,
and why have I never heard of it?
And it's one of the biggest questions I ask in every corporate meeting I do in my office in Ashburn, Virginia. But in my effort to explain it, IBTS is a not-for-profit, a national company managed out of the Ashburn, Virginia area. And we got our start in compliance, essentially, doing HUD monitoring for manufactured housing.
Okay.
We do more manufactured housing inspections than any agency. We actually inspect 10% of the houses built in the United States annually.
My goodness, which is
through that manufactured housing program.
And this is to ensure that they're built to a specific level of livability.
Correct, it's to standardization.
Right.
IBTS has helped develop that standard, and then we assist in measurement or enforcement of that standard. For manufactured housings are done differently in factories as opposed to your AHJs or your municipalities that are typical.
Yeah.
So another value I think that IBTS provides is that resource, on site.
Yep.
Where we're able to not necessarily bring you to our municipality, we bring the expert to your municipality in a way.
Rudy, you mentioned it's a not-for-profit. How is it governed?
So IBTS is governed by 5 board-appointing agencies. The one that's most notable in the solar industry is the International City County Managers Association, or ICMA.
Okay.
National League of Cities, NACO, which is the National Association of Counties, if I get this all right,
yep.
the NGA, the National Governors Association, and CSG, the Council of State Governments.
Now, if you're wondering why his computer magically appeared, it's because it's easier to remember those acronyms and harder to remember the actual words. So I really appreciate you using the cheat code there. For those who would like to see some of the data that Rudy routinely references, and you may be even pulling up some stuff about where you have offices and things like that, or how you operate across the U.S., we'll happily have Rudy send you the slide deck if you'd like to see it as well. Rudy, I think that what's interesting is you've been at IBTS for 13 years. You are specifically working in the energy services portion of IBTS.
Yep.
How does IBTS integrate into the way that utilities or municipalities have a handshake with the solar industry specifically?
There's a number of ways, and I guess to avoid making this a 3-hour conversation about IBTS, yeah. I'll speak more specifically to our solar group.
Yep.
IBTS has several divisions within it: local government services, Fed services, and the one where energy services lives under building department services. Energy in its construct is essentially a flow down of a current building department service, the enforcement of a code over top of a construction action. So the way that we particularly interact with AHJs downstream is by post-installation inspection of installs,
right?
But also by creating a data analysis or creating gap analysis using data to identify either areas where training may be better served, or maybe even local community needs, such as workforce development topics in certain areas, certain demographics, et cetera. So we coordinate, I guess, on one front with the actual engagement with the industry. One of the things we do on the back end in supporting the code officials is training direct to code officials and standardization of code enforcement nationally. Okay. So solar, it spans a number of proficiencies, including electrical, as we all know, but mechanical, structural, plumbing, conceivably. Does an electrical inspector look at the roofing considerations, or do they have kind of combination trade-off efforts? I think all that's the easy question when you even know what you're enforcing to begin with.
Right.
We have 15,000 jurisdictions. The code varies a little bit in each one of those.
You can imagine.
Yeah. So one of the things I do is we work with NREL and the team at SIA to develop the nationally recognized ANSI installation standard.
Right.
We're also creating one for O&M. So we'll have a residential installation standard and a residential and commercial O&M standard.
Okay.
And these are specific towards guiding just what it is that a code official is looking at.
Got it.
Demystifying the act of measurement and verification and compliance verification for solar PV or renewable energy as a whole.
Okay. So the code official's job is to make sure that at a local AHJ level, authority having jurisdiction, a solar array or any other aspect of an installation, be it electric vehicle, et cetera, with regards to, let's just think broadly about the electrification of the home. The code official is there to make sure that the code is followed, that the system is installed safely, and that and even that the crew is doing things in the proper manner, the proper sequence, et cetera, right?
Yep.
And where IBTS comes in, it sounds like there's kind of two prongs. Help me, because I want to bring this back to how an installer who maybe has never heard of IBTS would be thinking to themselves, well, why do I care? That's great. Like, you guys help you help those guys make sure they know how to look over our shoulder, right? But more than training the code officials, you bring standardization across the different trades, and you also help major companies with the uniformity, or lack thereof, of their workforce understanding how to implement these codes across the nation, right? Talk a bit about the balance that IBTS provides.
And I think some of that comes into the approach that I take overseeing as our director for the last 6 years, operations or strategy. If you think about the folks that you just mentioned, all of them are stakeholders in the acquisition of the solar project.
Right.
The installer has a role, the code official, the consumer, the engineer, anyone participating in that.
The insurance company.
All of them have a role.
Yeah.
And not one of those roles are separate of the others.
Yeah.
Right? The The installer is selling a product that will be assessed or inspected by the code official.
That's right.
The code official has a public responsibility of assessing that risk and ensuring that safety. The consumer has an off-taking responsibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So from IBTS's point, we use data to drive the topics that we train on, and then we change the topic of the education specific to the audience. From an installer, I might be telling you, here are common deficiencies and here's how you don't include them in your installation process.
Right.
From a code official, I'll say, if your process is limited to your time on site post-install, here are the top 13 things that are done wrong. Spend your time focusing on these.
Sure.
Or, hey homeowner, if you're going solar, here's some things to know about how to use solar after it's installed, or some of the considerations you should have about your building or its envelope during the installation. How do you qualify an installer? What's better, PPA or lease? A number of different things that inevitably will just be questions in a new market.
Yeah.
And 15,000 different jurisdictions, there's 15,000 different answers to that question.
So you mentioned things like top 10 or 13 problems with an install or homeowner considerations.
The dirty baker's dozen, I call it.
Yeah. And homeowners considerations. Are those distilled in some way into assets that folks can easily find at IBTS website, or how is that communicated? How's that content pushed out into the world?
So as we move into next year, I've switched up our strategy a little to address some of our weaknesses.
Yeah.
Primarily, we'll get a contract from a state agency similar to NYSERDA or something where we'll provide training to code officials.
Right.
And they're very much the audience specific to that environment or that program. We do a lot of building official association trainings and that sort of thing. But primarily the way that we try to integrate with, say, an installation team, one of our fundings 3 years ago was a Department of Energy funding where we expanded our solar installation and inspection platform to be available to local and regional installation teams.
Okay.
These are really good tools that are used to commission systems, inspect systems, or aggregate data and provide accountability for companies that maybe have multiple crews, or maybe even want to integrate a third party to verify their installation. So expanding our software to more wide audience, but also creating value within that software so you as an installer can see data trends, identifying your top 5 deficiencies. So if you were going to work on a training program, train yourself in these 5 things because you do them currently most often than anything else. And I think these are really efficient ways that, you know, as installers we approach, what do we do? Do we invest in install training or do we go make money and profit?
Right.
Well, at some point these need to intersect and we need to do so efficiently. So data provides a really good area for me to drill into exactly what I'm doing wrong and make sure I'm training my teams on the most relevant things that are going to promote quality. So I think from an install point, either looking for IBTS's tools such as label infographics, our nationally recognized inspection checklist that we developed in combination with NABCEP was our partner during that DOE funding, and we actually tracked and measured that inspection checklist against the PVIP job task analysis.
Yeah.
So this isn't just Rudy's opinion on
fantastic.
what's important. This is an actual industry accepted and proven measured outcome.
And that checklist, for example, is available at the IBTS website?
That is correct,
okay,
IBTS.org.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure the link to IBTS.org where you can find that checklist and download it. We're all about at Suncast giving tools and advice on how to level up, right? We want folks to be able to integrate this information and immediately go out and implement it to improve their career, their business. In that regard, is there anything as someone who is routinely helping folks think about the pitfalls to avoid, is there anything that you find yourself coming back to more often this year with regards to either code enforcement or workforce development that is kind of a public service announcement you want to give our audience?
Yeah, workforce development, I think, is the most valuable opportunity to get a return on your investment out of anything you could buy. Like if I were starting a solar company right now, would you buy the most expensive tools, or would you spend the money educating your staff that are going to take your company to the next level? Whether it's $1 million or $5 million, you have to learn every day. You have to train. This industry is going every 3 years at a minimum when there's a new code cycle. But I'd argue it's growing even faster. You see the technologies, you walk the booths, there's a new product every month. How does it work? How does it integrate? These are basic opportunities for training. If you're not focusing on workforce development, it's only a matter of time before you're out of work, in my opinion.
Rudy Saporite is Program Director for Energy Services at IBTs. If you would like to know how to get a hold of any of the resources that we mentioned, or partner with IBTs to help standardize your own services across your service area, or maybe across the United States, reach out to Rudy. How would they do that, Rudy?
So IBTS.org, navigate to our energy services page, or my direct email is just my first initial, my last name, RSAPORITE @IBTS.org.
I hope that you'll take us up on that offer. Also go find some of those resources, but most importantly, I hope that you will take heed to Rudy's most important advice, which is invest in the workforce that is helping elevate this industry and give us all the credibility that we know that we want and that we desperately need for our consumers in the marketplace. Keep it safe and keep it quality. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Suncast Media Zone, brought to you by LG Electronics Energy Storage Systems here at NABCEP Conference 2024. Thank you.
Thanks, Nico.